In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, on the 17th day of the month, on that day all the fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the windows of the heavens were opened. The rain fell on the earth 40 days and 40 nights. On the very same day, Noah with his sons Shem and Ham and Japheth, and Noah's wife, and the three wives of the sons entered the ark. They and every wild animal of every kind, and all the domestic animals of every kind, and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth, and every bird of every kind, every bird, every winged creature. They went into the ark with Noah, 2 and 2 of all flesh, in which there was the breath of life. And those that entered, male and female, of all flesh, went in as God had commanded him, and the Lord shut him in. The flood continued 40 days on the earth, and the waters increased and bore up the ark, and it rose high above the earth. The waters swelled and increased greatly on the earth, and the ark floated on the face of the waters. The waters swelled so mightily on the earth that all the high mountains under the whole heaven were covered. The waters swelled above the mountains, covering them 15 cubits deep. And all flesh died that moved on the earth, birds, domestic animals, wild animals, all swarming creatures that swarm on the earth, and all human beings, everything on dry land in whose nostrils was the breath of life died. He blotted out every living thing that was on the face of the ground, human beings and animals and creeping things and birds of the air. They were blotted out from the earth. Only Noah was left, and those that were with him in the ark. And the waters swelled on the earth 150 days.
As a deer longs for flowing streams, so my soul longs for you, O God. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God. When shall I come and behold the face of God? My tears have been my food day and night, while people say to me continually, where is your God? These things I remember as I pour out my soul, how I went with the throng and led them in procession to the house of God, with glad shouts and songs of thanksgiving, a multitude keeping festival. Why are you cast down, O my soul, and why are you disquieted within me? Hope in God, for I shall again praise him, my help and my God. My soul is cast down within me. Therefore I remember you from the land of Jordan and of Hermon from Mount Mizar. Deep calls to deep at the thunder of your cataracts. All your waves and your billows have gone before me. By day the Lord commands his steadfast love, and at night his song is with me, a prayer to the God of my life.
For Christ also suffered for sins once for all, the righteous for the unrighteous, in order to bring you to God. He was put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the spirit, in which also he went and made a proclamation to the spirits in prison, who in former times did not obey, when God waited patiently on the days of Noah, during the building of the ark, in which few, that is, 8 persons, were saved through water. And baptism, which this prefigured, now saves you, not as a removal of dirt from the body, but as an appeal to God for a good conscience, through the resurrection of Jesus Christ, who is gone unto heaven and is at the right hand of God, with angels, authorities, and powers made subject to him.
Thank you, scripture readers. Everyone, take a moment with me to imagine Noah out there on his ark in the middle of that flood, wondering where in God's not green, but now blue earth he is. He looks ahead. Water, water, more water. He looks to the left. Just water, water, and more water. He looks to the right. Water, water, and more water. He looks behind him. Just water, water, and more water. He looks down over the side of the boat. Just water, water, and more water. Every landmark that could possibly tell him anything about where he is covered in water, water, and more water. He's bobbing along there on top of the deepest, widest, most desolate ocean that could ever be imagined. And can we imagine a better image for the phrase lost at sea? I suspect most of us couldn't. But I also suspect that this past year has sometimes given many of us our own full taste of what that phrase can seem to mean, even if we never even once stepped on a boat this year. As I've hinted before, Shanda and I may have felt the most lost at sea this year when it has come to parenting. We look ahead. No parents, grandparents, babysitters, daycare, or school in sight. Just COVID, COVID, and more COVID. Thank you, Ollie. We look to the left, same. We look to the right, same. We look down, just a minefield of toys that make it hard to know how to navigate anywhere in our own house. This is the perfect timing this is the perfect sermon for Ollie to have interrupted me on. More about that later. Now, to be clear, I don't want to make us seem as lonely or unsupported as this sounds. We only kept our kids out of daycare for a few months. And also, many of you have been small miracles of support to us and our kids. Some of you even found safe ways to take them away from us from time to time. Even as we have felt lost at sea, I want to be clear that we're grateful to have been lost at sea with you. But my point is that if there ever was a perfect storm to cause parents to feel lost at sea in raising their kids, this would seem to be the year. Can you relate? Maybe it's not parenting for you. It's probably not parenting for a lot of you. Maybe it's your relationship with family or friends. Maybe it's your work. Maybe it's the social schedule or usual routines that you need to keep yourself feeling healthy and sane. Maybe it's fear about the future, your kids' future, your grandchildren's future. Maybe it's your relationship with God. Whatever it is, I suspect that each of us can think of some part, maybe a number of parts of our lives in which we felt lost at sea in 2020 and probably continue to in 2021. I suspect that right now, most of us in some way are a little like Noah in the middle of that flood, holed up for safety, trying to survive a global disaster, mostly stripped down to life's essentials, trying to wait out the danger, and feeling lost. Lost without so many of the usual landmarks that guide us. Well, today, for the first Sunday of Lent, and to set the stage for what we're going to be doing for all of Lent, I want to invite you into a biblical insight, an opportunity, we might even say, for navigating life when we're lost at sea. And it all starts for me with an unnamed psalmist who knows what we're going through. And so right now, let's take a moment to dive into the depths of what that psalmist might have to teach us. You see, the psalmist of Psalm 42 is much like so many of us right now, metaphorically lost at sea. Like us, they want to travel to the physical place where they usually worship God, but they can't. That important landmark in their social and spiritual life is inaccessible to them. They don't say exactly why they can't get there. My Bible's editor seems to assume it's because of illness, but whatever it is, what we do know is that they can't go there. They can't be there with their community to give glad shouts and sing songs of thanksgiving. The psalmist is missing their usual friends and family, their usual worship. They're missing the house of God itself. The psalmist has, in short, lost some of the most important landmarks that provide direction for their life. How lost do they feel? about as lost as a child of God might ever feel. God, they cry, when will I see your face again? They're feeling so lost, they're not sure they can even find God anymore. The one landmark that most of us count on for direction when every other landmark fails us. Now, given how dark that is, we might be forgiven if, having read these first verses of the psalm, we wonder what, if anything, this completely lost poet could have to teach us. Is this just the broken trying to lead the broken? But then the psalmist steps out of their lostness, at least just half a step, and asks their own soul, why are you cast down, O my soul? Why are you so anxious within me? And then, having done that, having gained just enough distance from their problem to get a sliver of perspective, the psalmist begins to bear witness to one of the Bible's great insights for navigating our lives when we're feeling lost at sea. It starts with some trust. They venture a little trust that they will find a way to praise God again. They venture a little trust that God will find a way to help them. That leads to some remembering. They remember the specific places where they have seen God most clearly before. And then they get to one of my favorite lines in the entire Bible. Deep calls to deep. Deep calls to deep. From that place of feeling lost at sea, from the depth of the wilderness, we also might say, or when we're way down deep in the valley low, from that place where we feel what we are invited to recognize in ourselves during Lent, from that same kind of place that most of us know all too well from this past year, the psalmist remembers that deep calls to deep. It's a beautiful phrase, right? But you might also be wondering, what does that even mean? Truthfully, it could mean a number of things in the context of this poem, but what I've experienced it to mean is this: that it's at times like these when we're feeling totally lost that we can meet God in ways we otherwise might not. Deep calls to deep. You see, it's in our deepest struggles, when we're lost in the deepest part of the sea, that God can meet us and love us and teach us new truths from God's own infinite depths. Deep calls to deep. Because here's the thing, it's at our deepest place of lostness that we so often meet a deeper God in deeper ways than we ever thought possible. Deep calls to deep. It's when we're as lost at sea as Noah, bobbing precariously over the deepest ocean that we can even imagine existing, with everything seemingly on the line, that we can't help but go to a deep place within ourselves and eventually find God in God's depth waiting for us. Deep calls to deep. Now, to be real, this isn't particularly fun truth. None of us likes to be lost, but it is still truth. It is the truth that when we are deeply lost, when we are stripped down to the bare essentials like Noah, it is most often then that we, like the psalmist, can reflect on, can even confront some of the things buried deep, deep down inside ourselves that we would otherwise leave buried. You know, the other day, Shanda said something to me, Jill, and Ben that I've really been thinking about. She was reflecting on the ways in which both of us, Shanda and I, have been feeling lost at sea sometimes as parents this past year. She was speaking from all of the reflecting we've been doing while confronted by the sheer aloneness of parenting through a pandemic. Feeling like it's entirely on us at every second of every day to know when to discipline, how to discipline, when to be firm, when to back off, when to refuse to give into a tantrum, when to just hold and comfort, and more than anything, perhaps to know, to be honest, what to do with some of the flat out anger we sometimes feel at our kids. Yeah, even our kids who are as downright cute and good and lovable as they are. Yes, even in this pastor's family that likely appears like it has it all together when you see us at our Sunday morning best. Because truly, we have spent a portion of this past year navigating serious feelings of anger that can sometimes overwhelm us. Anger that's not always pretty or brief. Anger that sometimes feels like it comes from somewhere dark inside of us. Anger that sometimes overwhelms us, leaves us feeling lost in our own depths. Now, don't get me wrong. I think we've managed to maintain a relatively healthy household through COVID. I'm glad to say we haven't spent the whole year yelling at our kids, but I am saying that I have a lot more empathy for any parents who have. Because as parents, Shanda and I have both had moments of feeling like we are parenting from a place of anger. And as a result, we've both taken our turns feeling lost in the depths. So it was from reflecting on all of that Shanda, in her usual wisdom, said something I needed to hear. She said to me, Jill and Ben, I just read something about parenting and anger that really hit me. She said, I just read that mostly we get mad at our kids for the things we're mad at or unresolved about in ourselves. When we're mad at our kids, it's usually a sign that there's something inside of us that needs to get worked out. Ouch. But also, yeah. Like I said, not a fun truth, but still a true truth. When do I get angriest at my kids? Well, to be honest, it's when what just happened here happens, except there's nobody watching. When you all watched and all interrupted me, I responded very patiently, as I hope you noticed. But let's picture what this might look like if I'm working by myself with nobody watching. Sitting here, right here, sometimes it plays out just like this. I'm at my computer thinking, what can I say in church this week? Okay, I got it. I'll start this week's service like this. I'll say, good morning, AMC family. Let's all just take a moment to breathe together, to give ourselves a moment to rest. Breathe with me. Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. And then I hear something. The door bursts open. Breathe in, breathe out. And then something happens. It's loud over here. And then this. Hey, I told you to stay out of here. Hey, are you listening to me? Get off the bed. Stop jumping under the covers. No. Do not tunnel under the covers. It's not tunnel time. Do you need a timeout? Do you need a timeout? Do you need a timeout? Do I need to come over there? Do I need to come over there? Okay, thank you. Thank you. Hey, close the door. Close the door. Come back here and close the door. Okay. Now, where was I? Okay. Everybody, breathe in, breathe out, breathe. You get the picture? You see, when Shanda shared her insight about parenting and anger, mostly we get mad at our kids for the things we're mad or uncertain about in ourselves. It reminded me of the truth I'm usually running from in those exact moments. When my kids interrupt my work, the thing that bothers me most is not that they came into my room, even though I probably told them not to. It's not even that they declare that it's tunnel time and completely mess up the covers, even though I have definitely told them it's never tunnel time. It's really that in that moment, I fear that the work I'm doing won't be good enough. Deep down, I fear that it won't be good enough and that this will reveal that I'm not good enough. And I fear that I need every second of every ounce of focus I can find to do something that will be good enough. And behind it all, I fear these things because at some point in my life, I've begun to believe that I'm only as good as the work I do. That the most important indicator of the value of my life is the quality of the work I do. In fact, if I'm being really honest with you today, it's not even the objective quality of my work that, at my worst, I put the most stock into. It's the value that other people give my work, that I use to indicate to me what my own value is. And it's really those fears causing me to go from 0 to 60 with my kids in those moments faster than Marv's favorite NASCAR driver. Now, I don't need to be a therapist to tell you that that's a problem. I also don't need to be a therapist to recognize that it's mostly just when I'm finally lost at sea that I actually confront and begin to deal with that part of myself, to start to work my way out of those thoughts. Because you see, when life is going along like it usually is, and all the usual landmarks are there to keep me feeling like I'm sailing smoothly, this is not the kind of thing I'm going to worry about in myself. But in the pandemic, well, I've been lost at sea. I've had to go there. I've sunk into that deep space within myself, and now I've had to explore it. Again, I'm not saying this is fun, but I'm saying this. Deep calls to deep. Deep calls to deep. Because you see, if it wasn't for the pandemic, who knows how long I might have had to wait to remember how much potential for anger there really is inside of me. And if I hadn't had to remember that, Shanda's insights wouldn't have meant a whole lot to me. And without recognizing all of that, I might not have had this profound reminder that I have work to do in recognizing myself as a beloved child of God. That no matter how good this sermon is or isn't, God is waiting to meet me where I need to confront my darkest truths. And God is waiting there to teach me even deeper, more life-giving truths. Because deep calls to deep. You see, it's when we're lost at sea, stripped of the things that usually distract and flatter us, that we can reflect on, even confront some of the things that are buried deep, deep down inside ourselves. But when we go there, sometimes only because we have to, but when we go there, we discover that we actually aren't alone in that place. We actually aren't, as we so deeply fear, unloved in that place. Because actually, when we go there, we discover that God is already waiting for us there, waiting for us in deep love, waiting for a deep encounter with us, waiting to invite us to learn some of the deepest truths we need to learn, waiting to do nothing less than to deepen new life in us. In the passage from 1 Peter that we read today, the author writes that the flood waters of Noah's time prefigured the water of baptism. Do you know what that means? It means that through Jesus, the deep water that we thought was all about destroying life is now the water that saves. That means that in the places where we feel lost at sea, Jesus, it turns out, doesn't come to condemn us, but to meet us, to save us, to show us his deepest truths, to show us that when we feel most lost at sea, deep calls to deep. This Lent, I invite you to look for how God's deep calls to your deep. I invite you to begin by asking yourself where you feel lost in the depths. And then I invite you to recognize that place and then to look for how Jesus is already there waiting for you, and to look for what about God's depth you might encounter there. Over the next 6 Sundays, we'll explore different areas of depth that God calls us to: deep healing, deep hope, deep care for creation, deep wisdom. As we do, I invite you to ask, where in your life do you feel lost in the deep part of the sea? And what might it mean for you to experience the deep, deep love of Jesus in that place, comforting you, teaching you, offering you new life?